I do not see women hesitating even once for getting a makeup kit or getting a dress. Constantly read the world around us. Let me experience the freedom of being human by also making errors. The moment the inner world changes, the external world changes. Be curious about everything and anything around us. Something that naturally comes to each of us. Start from there. Our mind can play a beautiful game with us by distracting all the time. So when we don't have any control on our thoughts, how can we really try to control anything that's happening in our life? If we can start with where am I in this moment and what am I sitting with, it can really open up Pandora's box within us.
Hi everyone, this is Shagun Agarwal, and in today's video I have a very special person with me who is going to explore topics such as emotional intelligence, the power of consistency, leadership skills, gender equality, postpartum depression, managing emotions such as fear, and so much more. The very special guest I have with me is Veena Sethuraman, a TEDx speaker, vice president of InMobi, and an executive leadership coach. She also works towards helping leaders find passion and purpose in their life. And she works towards increasing awareness around topics such as mental health and amplifying the voices of the LGBTQ community. Her insights are sure to spark a meaningful and enlightening conversation. So let's dive in. Hi Veena, how are you? I'm so excited to have you in today's episode.
Thank you so much for having me as part of this conversation. I was really looking forward to taking this forward with you.
Same here, Veena. Veena, it is said that if you find something that you're passionate about, then work doesn't seem like work. So how can anyone discover their passion or their love for something that they can work upon so work doesn't feel like work and they feel like this is what they're meant to do in life?
This is my favorite question always. Anything related to purpose and why do we exist? Because I do believe that takes us to the core of us, something that naturally comes to each of us. Start from there and do it more and more. Do it to an extent where it really brings you joy, and the rest of it will automatically fall in place. That has been my belief always. So I have always enjoyed connecting with people, understanding people's psyche. Why do people behave the way they behave? That has been the seeking in me always from childhood. And hence, I just focused on that. And the more I focused on that, I think it took me to my purpose. That's how I went about it. So whenever it comes to question around purpose, one, look at what you or understand what you enjoy the most, what comes naturally to you, and whether you enjoy it the most. Second, if you were to enjoy that most, how can you start helping other people by doing what you're doing? And third, is there a way to figure out how to earn from the same space? These are the ways I would generally invite people to look at their purpose.
Correct. So I made a video on this and I called it the career sweet spot. So something that you're naturally good at and something that really interests you and something you can be paid for. If you find an intersection of all of these things, then work will not feel like work and you will enjoy every bit of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Bang on. I can't agree more.
Yeah. Why is self-awareness so crucial, especially for people in their young age? And how can increasing self-awareness lead to more fulfilling career choices and personal growth?
Okay, so for me, self-awareness is the foundation that can enhance the quality of our living, right? Or quality of our life, quality of our mental health. What do I mean by that? When I'm walking with awareness on a particular road, let's say, when I'm walking, knowing that, okay, this particular part of the road is rough, this particular part of the road is not so rough, and hence, this is a place that I need to avoid. This is a place I can probably jump and cross that space. When I observe on these lines, it just makes it easier for me to take that path. That's how I see self-awareness in our life. Self-awareness is a way to hold the mirror for ourselves or allow the person or people around us to hold the mirror and see our own selves without judgment, without being overcritical, and to really allow ourselves to realize that that is also part of us. And the more we allow ourselves to see in a holistic way, we integrate all parts of ourselves in the way we look at ourselves, the more we will be in flow in life. And that's why self-awareness is important. And self-awareness for me, in the last 12 years especially of my life, has taught me that self-awareness is as important as breathing. Probably the breathing happens in a very easier way. We don't need to do anything to earn it. From the time we are born to the time we die, it's always with us. There is nothing special that I need to do in order to earn the capacity to breathe. However, for me, self-awareness is equally important.
Yeah.
The more I allow myself to become self-aware, the easier my life gets. So the purpose of self-awareness is not to make my life easy, but the purpose of my self-awareness is to make the quality of my life meaningful and worthy enough to exist in this planet and contribute to it.
Yeah. Very beautifully projected, Veena. Self-awareness is like holding a mirror in your hand and seeing yourself from an objective perspective.
Yeah. And to add to that, to go back to your question, why it is important from childhood or at least for youngsters, it's not about really the age. Certain things, probably if it had come my way as an awareness in my early 20s, I wouldn't have appreciated it the way it came to me when I was in my 30s or while I'm in my 40s. So I do believe a certain aspects about us will come our way only when it is meant to. There is also something called divine timing here, and I strongly believe in it. So rather than pushing for self-awareness, can we just be open in the space and wander with wonder? Be curious about everything and anything around us. Why am I like this? Why am I behaving in the way I'm behaving? Why is this person behaving the way they are behaving? Is there a pattern in my life when it comes to success, relationship, sex, and money? Is there a pattern that I have with my child and partner or with my parents? The more we start getting curious about such things, self-awareness will automatically happen. But at the same time, it is so important for us to go through certain experiences in order to build awareness as well. So not everything can be learned from observing others' life. Some things we have to go through for us to become aware of. That's what I believe about self-awareness.
Yeah. I mean, that is why we have so many tools which are suggested by different coaches, such as journaling, such as meditation and gratitude, writing down your strengths and analyzing your own self in different situations.
There are lots of tools out there, but I do believe, at least based on my life, I would suggest for me working with a therapist really helped. Because if we were to use self-help tools, there is probably a limit with which we will understand certain things. Because we sit with a lot of biased questions, and the same mind with the same bias is giving the answers as well. And when we look at the tool and try to understand, we interpret it in a way that probably there is a high possibility our mind will play a game with us to just take it in a way that is favorable to us. But for me, self-awareness is never about comfort. Self-awareness is never about just reading and taking only what is favorable to us. Sometimes self-awareness is about really breaking our comfort zone. And sometimes it is about making us crumble. And all these experiences are necessary as part of self-awareness. So for me, one of the ways to go about self-awareness is to work with a therapist. Second is to be part of a community. It could be part of a group coaching. It could be part of a women leadership group. It could be part of a set of like-minded people. Or it could be part of a purpose that a lot of people are passionate about. So the more you are part of these communities, the way you work with others, the way others work with you, the way you show up, the way you get triggered, all these can be wonderful opportunities to know about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And a therapist asks the right kind of questions, I think, that one is not able to ask oneself.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's a key to opening many doors within us, because many times we are not even aware that about certain parts of us, because it could be part of our subconscious, unconscious. The other person will be able to see it in us. We might not be able to see it in us. And hence, it's so important for allowing somebody to hold that mirror in a neutral way.
Correct. Correct. Veena, coming to the aspect of leadership, emotional intelligence is a very, very important aspect of leadership, and research has time and again proved that to us. How do you think leaders can develop their emotional intelligence level, the ability to manage your own emotions and also understand the emotions of others, especially in this age when we are so active on social media and where work environments have become hybrid? We have to work from home through Zoom calls and also go to office. So just managing that transition shift and also seeing ourselves being so active on social media. How can one develop emotional intelligence?
There are multiple aspects as part of this. One is to realize that it's an ongoing journey. We are never going to reach a place where we can believe we have arrived. Right? Every day, every person can be a teacher. And to be able to start experiencing life with that angle to see, I'm never going to reach a stage where I can call myself 100% emotionally intelligent. That's not going to happen. So I'm always going to be a masterpiece and work in progress. And that's how all leaders are going to be. So the first part is going to is about really acknowledging this in a very practical way, rather than beating oneself, just because we are not good in certain aspects. So probably I'm very good in managing my anger, but I'm not that great in managing my shame. And is it okay for me to not manage my shame very well? Absolutely yes, because probably that's what I'm here for, to learn in the next couple of years. So rather than trying to look at this like a test that we need to pass every time, to be able to look at every opportunity as an opportunity just teaching us something about ourselves. That's a key here. So one of the key permissions that leaders need to give to themselves is it's okay to be a masterpiece and work in progress. And it's absolutely okay to be a human in the process. We don't need to be perfect in managing emotions. We just need to be open to emotions, because emotions are our allies. And the more we see them as allies, the more we see them as a guidance to help us guide on something, the more we'll be able to manage emotions. So that's the second aspect. The third is give open psychological permission to people around us to give us feedback, to hold the mirror. And I do believe the real growth in us happens when we can seek the feedback and take the feedback without getting offended.
Yeah.
Right? And that's going to be very important as part of emotional intelligence, because feedback is a must. I'm not going to get everything right all my life. I'm absolutely, as a human, sometimes going to fall from the pedestal others have put me on. Sometimes I'm going to let myself down, and I'm going to fall from the pedestal I have kept for myself. And in all these process and experiences, can I allow myself to hold myself with kindness? Because it's okay to be human and to experience life. That's going to be a key part of the learning experience, because many times I see leaders struggling in this space because either we think we can sustain when others put us on higher pedestal, or we are very hard on ourselves by putting ourselves on higher pedestal. But there is no way we'll be able to sustain both, because I'm here to not take care of your impression about me. I'm here to engage with life in its full essence. So let me experience the freedom of being human by also making errors. And that allowance and permission is what makes us truly intelligent in managing emotions.
Yeah.
So that would be my way of looking at it.
So very beautifully put, Veena. When you talk about being open to emotions, I think listening skills also play a very important as a key over here.
Yes, absolutely. Because we learn a lot by listening. If we are talking all the time, probably we are not going to learn much. So the balance between how much are we talking, how much are we listening is going to be very important. And many times we'll be amazed how much we have to learn in that space. Because when we talk very well, we may think that we are also good listeners, but we might be completely missing out on some opportunities to know about ourselves when we are only talking and when we are not listening. And many times when we are in the space of let's say, a meeting or talking to someone else, we are more worried about what is that we are going to talk next or ask next, rather than genuinely attuning to the other person. And that's where the connection is lost. And this is where we live in our head and not in our body. So how do we allow ourselves to be fully available for ourselves and the other person in the body? Because what needs to happen next and the question that we need to take in the process will automatically come if we are fully available for ourselves and the other person in this moment. And that's where listening is very important. More than listening, the whole presence is very important.
Correct. When talking about whole presence, people bring their phones, and I was reading across a research which said that even if you're not looking at your phone is on the table and you're sitting with a person, that in itself is distracting you, making you not fully present for that person.
Yes, absolutely. And that is just one way of getting distracted. I can, very well fake it in a meeting as if I'm concentrating, but I can be fully in my head thinking about another meeting that is going to happen tomorrow, or thinking about my son who's not well at home, or thinking about something that happened yesterday. So it is not many times, a very visible distraction. Our mind can play a beautiful game with us by distracting all the time. And I loved it when in Vipassana, which is a meditation, in the space of Buddha's teaching, they teach us, they help us understand and become aware of how we are constantly living in the memory of yesterday or in the imagination of tomorrow. And very rarely we live in the moment.
Present moment, yeah.
And hence, distraction is a huge part of our psyche.
That is so true. So true. I was reading a quote which said that the best gift you can give someone is your complete attention. And it holds very much true today.
I think this topic itself can take hours.
We can just go on and on.
We can just go on and on about this because I think it is very difficult to, in the here and now, in the age that we are in, where there is a lot of mechanism to distract us. It is difficult to give our complete attention to someone. And according to me, just asking ourselves, where am I right now? What am I sitting with? That itself can bring a whole lot of awareness about ourselves. Going back to the emotional intelligence, it is very easily said than done, the statement that you came up with. But when it comes to actual practical application of it, it's very difficult. And that's why I think it is a very, very empowering, leading question to our own self-awareness. If we can start with, where am I in this moment? And what am I sitting with? It can really open up Pandora's box within us.
Yeah, so true, so profound and so deep.
Thank you.
Veena, I was skimming through your book because I'm an avid reader. I keep reading a lot of books, and your book, the title says "A Pinch of Hope in a Bowl of Life," and very interesting title of the book, I must say. And I'm sure you must have thought about a lot of things before boiling down to this topic. And it gives a lot of valuable insights on self-love and self-resilience. So what does this title explain about the book, and why did you pick this one? What inspired you, and what can the readers take away from this book?
Thank you for asking about this book because it's very close to my heart. The entire idea of the book happened because of an experience that I went through. A colleague of mine who's a gay came out to me during a official dinner, and hearing his story was such an emotional experience. And it really moved me. The pain that he went through in his life, what happened to him in the mental health space, and how his family supported him in coming out, and his own exploration of his sexuality and sexual orientation. That really moved me. And I went on thinking, how do I bring his story to the world? And at that point of time, I was part of TEDx Bangalore core team, and hence I could introduce him to the curator and could take the conversation forward from there. But interestingly, probably because I was strongly, deeply seeking this with a lot of desire of bringing that story into the world, one night this message came in a dream at around 3 o'clock in the morning, and it was very clear as a dream to bring this out as part of a book. And I just suddenly woke up and I immediately jotted it down. And I jotted it down, the idea of bringing 5 such stories of the people who have inspired me in my real life. 5 stories of people who I think question some sort of stereotyping in the society, some sort of question the conditioning that we carry, and how through their lives they have broken the shackles of their mind and the society. So in few minutes I knew whose story I wanted to bring and why I wanted to bring those stories. And I just sent a message to them at around 4 o'clock in the morning. And by around 7 a.m., all of them had agreed for me to bring their stories to the world. So that's how this idea of this book was born. And one thing that I generally apply in my life is I really go with my intuition and innately what is coming up as a gut feeling. And I do not really go with intellectual debates within me. So I did not really put a name to the book for the entire almost like 8 months. I just went with the idea that each book, the climax of each story, is going to bring out hope in the reader.
Yeah.
And whatever I shared so far is going to be the theme of the book. And one day, suddenly, this particular title came to my mind, A Pinch of Hope in a Bowl of Life, because I think we are all looking for, in whatever we are doing, we are all looking for that one small dot of hope.
Yeah.
And hopelessness is something that we struggle to sit with. I've only experienced me and everyone I work with running away from the sense of hopelessness because we don't like that particular emotion. So I thought, then why not bring that as part of the title? And that became the title, and that's how I went about it.
Wow. For anyone who is looking for hope in their life and who wants to get inspired from real life stories, I would highly recommend this book to all the viewers watching this episode right now or listening to the podcast on Spotify. Do read this book. The title of the book is A Pinch of Hope in a Bowl of Life. And do let Veena and I know which story inspired you the most and how could you relate to any of the stories in your life. And if you could make any changes in your life, reading this book, that would mean a lot to Veena, I'm sure.
Thank you so much, Shagun, for such a beautiful articulation. I like it when others are pitching for my book. Stay blessed.
Of course, of course. My entire YouTube channel is around books, and I keep reading books. I keep posting out reviews, and I keep interviewing authors. So that has been my sweet spot all the time, and it revolves around books, authors, stories, non-fiction book, autobiographies. So that is where my focus area always is. Even if I'm talking about something else, somewhere or the other, I reach to this topic.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'll go through your channel because I would love to get some recommendations for books.
Oh, sure.
Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. We are talking about failure and talking about criticism. This is something that holds people back. I've myself seen that for the fear of failure and for the fear of being judged or being laughed at, I didn't take certain decisions in my life, which if I would have taken 10 years back, it would have brought about a more positive change, remarkable change in my life. And I see a lot of people having those kinds of emotions of fear of failure, fear of criticism, fear of judgments, what will people think, log kya kahenge, one attitude. So how can we overcome such fears and take the step forward towards starting something new or trying something new and seeing if it is working out or not working out, irrespective of what people say, what society thinks, and what our own fears are around that?
This is again very close to my heart as a topic because last year I gave my second TEDx talk with the topic Failure is Success in Progress.
I saw that with you.
In that speech, I spoke about the postpartum depression I went through when I had my son in 2009 and how that paved the way for me to start exploring my own inner journey and how it inspired me to become a therapist and to, carry this purpose of healing people while I'm healing myself with the help of another healer in my life, right? So during this last 12 years, from the time the postpartum depression started to now, there are a couple of things I have experienced and I've learned in the process. And this is through my own work on myself and my work with my clients. One is to not be ashamed of anything that's happening in our body, right? And let's start with depression. There is a lot of stigma around depression. And we all would like to come across as sorted 24/7, 365 days. But we are not machines. We are humans. So how can we really be kind to ourselves in accepting the fact that there are many things we don't control about our mind? For example, you and I have no idea what thought is going to occur in our mind in the next second, right? We don't have any control on our thoughts. So when we don't have any control on our thoughts, how can we really try to control anything that's happening in our life? Whether it is others' behavior, whether it is a flow of life, whether it is who enter our life, who exit our life. Many times we cannot control what happens, what universe brings to us. So it really starts with our own body. And hence, how can we be more kind to what is going on within us and not look at depression or anything related to mental health with shame? Rather, look at it with a lot of kindness and compassion. That's the first point.
Right.
Second is, fear exists for a reason. Every emotion exists for a reason. Let me ask you this. Have you ever come across anything in the nature which is useless?
No.
So we cannot point out a single thing in nature that is useless. If there is anything useless, it is man-made, right? So if humans are part of the nature, look at the intelligence that has gone into creation of nature. The same intelligence has gone into the creation of human beings' body as well. So why do we believe that there are some emotions that are important and useful and there are some emotions that are useless? It is absolutely our conditioning and our ego in the collective consciousness and unconsciousness that we have built up. There is nothing called useful emotion and useless emotion. Every emotion is a guidance. Every emotion is an ally. And every emotion is an important part of our body because that's how we are designed. So how can we unconditionally accept every emotion and start looking at what is this emotion trying to teach me? And if we start looking at emotions as teachers instead of enemies, a lot of things can happen in a very cooperative way. We can co-create something with our fear. So fear is here to help us see how we are underestimating or discounting our own strength. Fear is here to help us see our own fantasy with grandiosity. Fear is here to help us see how much we are overthinking about things that is beyond our control. So these are there to help us understand about ourselves. And the more we acknowledge or accept these things about us, the more we'll be able to transcend the fear. And I always say this, the opposite of fear is not fearless. Opposite of fear is compassion. Opposite of fear is acceptance and acknowledgement of life. Opposite of fear is faith.
Wow. I mean, there's so much to talk about this topic, Veena. I have so many things that I want to just add on here. Talking about postpartum depression, when I went through that, I felt like it is so real. And we women should be talking about it more often because everyone goes through that, but there's not much awareness. People don't talk about it. People feel it, women feel it, mothers feel it. But then they think that maybe that's very natural or maybe that is natural and something that should be talked about, something that they should be knowing that they are going through something different is happening because they feel that everything is okay. But no, you need more assistance at that time. You need more support. And once you accept that something different is happening with you and you are getting into a zone of feeling depressed, then only you can seek help. But most people are not aware, and that's why there is no help around this thing. So we as women community, we should be talking about this and making it a real phase of our life.
Bang on. Can't agree more on this, Shagun, because I do believe postpartum depression is I keep talking about this. We all talk about midlife crisis, right? Midlife crisis is actually midlife awakening, if we were to be truly open to the experience. So for me, postpartum depression is a very, very powerful experience to acknowledge our own darkness and our own limitations in our body and mind. What I see a lot of women doing is trying to be a super mom in that phase, wanting to take care of everything about the family, their parents, wanting to also come up in their career, and also being very hard on self. Probably that crumbling is required in order to understand our own darkness and our own need to please everyone and our own need to be validated by everybody around us. So what would it take for us to truly see our depression as an ally to slow down, an ally who's helping us to take rest and relax our body, an ally who's telling us you don't need to be a perfect mom, you're already a good mom. And we don't need to do anything to become a perfect mom. The fact that we have given birth to the child itself makes us a good mom, right? So how do we really accept these aspects around us? That's one thing. Second, I also believe talking about postpartum depression anywhere and everywhere as a woman is really the way to give psychological permission to more women in this world to own that experience, Because when I went through it, I was so hard on myself because my fantasy was when my son is born, I'm going to handle it like how they do it in Bollywood movies, right? My makeup, even my makeup will not be spoiled. And I'll be so perfect in the way I'm handling my family and my son. I will fall in love with him the moment I see him in the hospital. And it was such a tough experience when I went through it because I realized every bit of my imagination was a fantasy. And I was living in a bubble of positivity that I had to crack for myself. And that's why it is important to talk about the real life and real experience. And no, it is not a Bollywood movie.
Yeah. I mean, I started telling people and other mothers that I wish someone would have told me that it's gonna be very difficult and there is no need to chase perfection at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, when I went through it, I remember calling my friends and asking them, did you go through it or is it just me going through it? And they were all like responding as a matter of fact, saying, yeah, it is very common. We all went through it. And I was so furious at them at that point of time asking, why didn't you tell me that? I would have been more prepared. Yeah.
I mean, postpartum depression, then the whole phase of going through feeding, challenges of managing an infant. It was such a small human being, and it's like the whole world is on you, and you start feeling as if what day and what night everything starts feeling the same.
Yeah. I remember crying once because a mosquito bit my son. And he was like probably 2 months old. And I cried asking, how could I let the mosquito bite my son? And so actually, it was probably one of the darkest phases of my life. I'm glad I survived it to talk about it today. But yeah, you're right. I think we all need to talk about it.
Yeah, I remember one incident, similar incident. So in the US, there's a hot water tap that instantly starts giving hot water. So instead of opening the cold water tap, I opened the hot water tap, and my daughter's, I think she was 2 months old, and her hand was down the water tap. So, and I instantly closed it because I knew that she has already felt the heat. And and after that, I took care of her, and then I went to office and I had a one-on-one with my manager. And immediately I started talking about that incident instead of focusing on other things, which I had to talk to her as per the agenda. So when everything starts becoming secondary and something that has happened to your child becomes primary, I feel that we start overshadowing our own self. We start overlooking our own self, and self-love is at that moment the most important part. If you're taking care of yourself, I think you're taking care of everything else also around you. And which a lot of women, take a back seat on their career, take a back seat on their own self-care. But you cannot pour from an empty cup, after all. You have to take care of yourself first to take care of your infant or your family or anyone else in life. And that's not just for that phase, it's for every phase in your life.
Yes, absolutely. Very well said.
And I really like when you talked about emotions, that there is no bad emotion. Everything is there to give you something. Even an emotion such as fear is there to give you something. It is not going to take away from you anything. So you don't have to run away from it.
Yes. That's how we are designed.
Correct. Moving to a different subject, Veena, talking about upskilling. The times are changing so fast. Today we have AI, tomorrow we'll have something else. So for individuals who are looking to upskill themselves, and also to stay consistent with it, because consistency, I feel, is extremely important in life. You do whatever, you have to stay consistent if you have to see long-term success for yourself. Then how should one set achievable goals and also stay motivated and consistent throughout the learning process?
While upskilling is a very, very important part of our growth and how we go about expanding our own presence in whatever we are contributing. I look at upskilling from 3 aspects, right? One is immediately do not look at it from a outcome point. Don't chase the outcome. If you're saying, I want to be a director by the age 40 years old, by the time I'm 40 years old, and you're chasing that, then you're so getting caught with a very limited way of looking certain things. If you were to truly look at, how do I want to show up in this world? And how am I limiting myself in that space? What kind of, what lack of knowledge is stopping me? What lack of skills is stopping me? from showing up that way today. If I can start from that experience in the here and now, that will automatically take me to a space where even if I don't have a goal to reach a senior most position by a certain level, it will automatically happen because I'm focusing on what I can control and change rather than what I cannot control and change. And that's very, very important part of upskilling. That many times I see, especially a lot of women, when I speak to them about them investing on a certification or some sort of a therapy or coaching, I hear women talking a lot about wanting to save money for their kids, for their partner, so on and so forth. But I do not see women hesitating even once for getting a makeup kit or getting a dress or something related to their physical looks. So I do challenge this particular conditioning to see if the kind of importance that we give to our physical looks, why are we not giving it to our upskilling? Why are we not giving it to the inner work? Because if we were to focus there, we are going to make our own life easier in the process and the growth will happen automatically. And many times I see women, depending on the organizations they are in, to say, if the organization I'm working on invests on me, then I will do a certification. And I actively challenge this aspect as well. Of course, and you can expect your organization to invest on you, but it should be your primary need to own your growth. And it is not your organization's need. So the more I would invite, I really would, actively invite women to invest on themselves, to put aside some money, some amount every year, irrespective of they are seeing a tangible result that year in that investment or not. Because these kind of investments, we may not see the result immediately, but it may really help us in long term. And that's a kind of visibility that we need to hold rather than looking for any immediate results. Third is to be constantly read the world around us. It's like how we read the room when we get into a meeting. Similarly, can we start reading the world? What does it mean? Can we attune to what's going on around us? What kind of technology is getting more spoken about? What kind of mindset people are getting stuck on? What kind of issues are bothering humanity more? And these are the things that are going to innately guide us if we were to really get attuned to what is happening around us. So I would say constantly read the world around you. That can be a beautiful, guiding space for you to understand what you need to upskill on.
Yeah. And when you talk about, Veena, the fact that women could spend anything on the way they look, on makeup and on dresses, and they don't spend on upskilling, I would also like to challenge, and I agree with you on that we should be challenging other women on this. That if you're spending some amount on the way you look, that's okay, that's your personal choice, but you should also be doing on upskilling yourself. And I would not just talk about women over here, but also society in general. Because I was reading an article which said that Mark Zuckerberg wears the same color t-shirt, not the same t-shirt, but he has a set of t-shirts which look identical, and he wears the same t-shirt every single day when he's going to work. Why? Because he doesn't want to spend time in deciding how he's looking and what he's wearing, which I absolutely agree with. If I would be given a chance of doing that, I would love to do that. I would 100% love to wear the same outfit to work every single day. But that's not how everyone sees women. If I'm wearing a different dress, then people are taking a notice of it. And when they are noticing that, then obviously I'm getting noticed in my organization and people pay attention to how I'm looking, how I'm speaking, and my prospects of growth increases. So as a society also, we need to challenge this notion that if we are deciding something like that to make a man more productive so he doesn't spend time in deciding what he's wearing, then why isn't the same for a woman?
So here, I'm going to take the risk of sounding very privileged right now. And this is just based on the inner work that I have experienced in me and the women I have worked with. If I were to wear similar top and, pant every day to office like Mark Zuckerberg, I'm sure there are people going to be judging me. I'm sure there are people who may ask me, what's wrong with you? Why are you coming like this every day? But nobody can stop me from going through the same process for myself. So my question would be, why is it so important for me to become answerable to everyone? And why is it so important for me to be likable by everyone? If I were to stand there and say, oh, this is what I like, and this is how I'm going to be, I don't think anybody is going to come and say, no, you have to come in another retire tomorrow. So why is it such a big mental block for ourselves? I do believe while as women, as community, we have gone through a lot in the history of our gender, and there is a lot that suffering has happened. I also constantly would challenge the space to say how much of this is a projection of our own inner shame, and how much are we really owning that shame and doing something about ourselves.
Yeah.
Because patriarchy, if we were to look at it, I would say all genders are equally victims of patriarchy. But as women, we talk more about it. And I don't think men have even the capacity to talk about the way they have been victimized as part of it. For example, a man should not cry is one of the biggest points there which blocks their own emotional healing and upbringing there, right? So, similarly, if we were to take any other gender, a transgender, they are also victims of the patriarchy. So I think every gender has suffered in the patriarchal setup. However, we all end up as communities, as genders, we all also project a lot onto the society. Very rarely I come across people who say, you know what, I'm scared of showing up in this way and I'm ashamed. Let me do the inner work here. Because the moment the inner world changes, the external world changes. And hence, can we keep focusing on the inner world is going to be my invitation.
Very, very important thing. I mean, most people don't think that every gender gets affected. We think that maybe only women or maybe LGBTQ or maybe some other, but men too, and something to think over.
Yes, absolutely. And I strongly believe, we cannot be the society that we are fighting for if we don't take men along. And they cannot have a successful society if they can't take women along. And for that matter, take every gender along, right? Because every gender contributes beautifully to this world and universe. So why leave anybody behind? And at the same time, we don't need to discount any pain. We don't need to exaggerate any pain. Can we see things for how they are? And then every being gets their share, in healing process.
Correct. Every being gets their share in the healing process. So beautiful. Talking about women again, Veena, how can women enhance their leadership, especially in male-dominated industries? There's so many industries which are male-dominated, and I've seen in the US because there's so many companies or industries where it's prominently male, and women are just seen as a misfit. They are seen as someone who doesn't belong over there. And a lot of people think that Western countries are not male dominated, but that's not true. It's just that we personally think as a mentality, we Indians think that Western countries are more advanced and they're well off, they're better than us. But that's absolutely not true. And I specifically want to say this now to the audience, that if you're thinking that you want to live in a foreign country and that life would be better and everything is much more fancier over there, then that's really, really not true. What you can get in India today, you can get anywhere, and you can get better in India. Trust me on that. And if you think that there is more equality in Western countries, and that's also absolutely not true, and especially not in the corporate world. So coming back to my question, Veena, how can women enhance their leadership skills in male-dominated industries? And how can they overcome their self-imposed limitations, something that is mentally bounding them and preventing them to pursue the career goals further?
So to start with, how do we break the narrative around ourselves as a woman? If that is taken care, then to crack in a male-dominated industry, I wouldn't say it will happen, but it will get easier, all right, compared to how it is today. For example, how many times have you observed a woman in a meeting starting to share a point of view by saying, I'm sorry, I have a point of view. I will not take more than a minute. Probably I'm going to ask a basic question, but still let me ask. This may sound silly, but still allow me to ask this question. How many times have you heard women saying such things?
So many times.
Many times. Have you ever come across a man in any meeting who has said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm going to come up with a stupid point, but still bear with me"? Or can I take a minute to just share this question? It will not take more than a minute. Have you ever heard a man saying this? Yeah. And this is the fundamental problem, right? Because we feel guilty as a gender. We feel guilt about everything, for claiming the space in a meeting, for showing up with our whole personality. If we are in office, we are feeling guilty about not being with our kids. If we are at home, we are guilty about not being, not traveling for a certain project with our colleagues.
Yeah.
When we are traveling, we are feeling not good enough about, attending our parents' birthday. We are always feeling guilty about something. If we can start acknowledging this within us, how do we live unapologetically in the way we show up every minute? Because we are doing what we need to do and we are there exactly where we meant to be in that moment. And as human being, we can only do so many things and we don't need to try to be there for everyone at every point of time. If we can genuinely own this part of our inner world, a lot we can take care in the external world. Second is, do we really need to become like a man in order to succeed in a corporate space? I do believe that a feminine energy is a very powerful energy, and we don't need to completely shift to a masculine energy in order to succeed in corporate space. So one of the things, at least in the setup that I'm in, I decided in 2019 that I'm going to wear cotton sarees every day with big jhumkas and black metal. And I, as you can see me, I am very comfortable in wearing no spin. And for me, this is about owning my feminine energy, right? And this is the way I show up. For you, probably it could be about red heels or a red lipstick. For someone else, it could be about something else. But how can we own our own energy, feminine energy that makes us feel very connected to ourselves, our body and our intuition, our emotions? How can we start owning that? The more we are comfortable in our own skin and we are not trying to become another man in the space, I think the more we'll be able to claim the space in this universe. And that's a key here. And it's also equally important to acknowledge the reality around us. That is, we come from a patriarchal setup and male-dominated space. So the things may not change probably in our lifetime. But by doing all this, probably our next generation will look up to us and learn from us. And they may take it a notch higher and deeper. And probably what we are doing right now today, I may probably have the result after 2 centuries. But can we still do it with hope? That's important for us to do something about the reality of the world today.
Correct. I think it's more about managing your own self. As women, we need to overcome our own mental limitations, self-imposed limitations that we have imposed on our own self for so many years, for generations. And then we should expect anything else from anyone, from any other gender. First, we have to work upon our own self as a community, and as women supporting each other. I believe we should really have a support system from each other. I mean, there is a saying that women they don't get along well, and that they're not supporting each other as much. But that needs to improve. We as women have to be supporting each other much more to grow as a community, as a gender.
Absolutely. At least in my experience, I learned to be who I am today because of some very powerful women. And I have been very fortunate in getting support of some women. And I've seen the power of, if women were to support women and hold each other, what we can create is really magic. Right? Because we understand certain aspects about our body and mind in a way that other genders may not be able to understand. So here, there are 2 aspects to this. One is creating a support system with women. So for example, For a career issue, I know which women to lean on. For another, let's say a personal issue, I know whom to go and speak and take support on. So similarly, we need to have a support system also with across genders, and this would include our family. So being able to talk openly, communicate openly with our family about our aspirations, about why we care so deeply about our aspirations and desires, and why it is important for us to take care of ourselves in order to take care of them. All these conversations are a must in the family setup, whether it is with our kids, our partner, our parents, so that we can seek that support. And the more we are supported in that space, the more we'll be able to move forward. And hence, it's so important to have one, a group of women that we are part of. Second, a systemic support that we create in a very deliberate way.
That's true. That's true. But nonetheless, Veena, I feel that last 30, 40 years, women have come a long way, at least in India.
Absolutely.
And let's be more positive about what the future holds.
I do believe that, from where we were
Yeah,
to where we are, we have come a long, long way.
long way, correct.
And at the same time, where we are to where we aspire to go as a community, that also is a long way, right? So it's okay to both celebrate the journey so far and to also be very ambitious and unapologetic about where we want to go from here on. And this is not about positive or negative for me, Shagun. For me, this is about just seeing things as they are. We don't need to brand anything as positive or negative, because darkness is a must for us to value the light, right? And through darkness is how we learn about light. And I strongly believe darkness is nothing but light in disguise. So unless we acknowledge things as they are, we will not be able to pave that light on the path that we need to move forward. So for me, it's not about positive or negative, because that's conditioning of our mind. For me, it's just about acknowledging the reality for what it is and just keep moving forward with acceptance, because acceptance gives us the courage to face it.
Yeah. Veena, there is so much to talk. I have so many other topics that I want to touch upon, but time is limited, and we'll have to close this. Maybe we do a second session, and that will be wonderful, because it was so nice to connect. As a woman and as a human being, you have so many insights, valuable ones to give to the audience. In so less time, you've shared so many things with the viewers, with the listeners. And I wish you all the best, Veena, for your future endeavors. The world needs people like you who are talking about mental health, who are talking about equality, who are talking about different genders, and you're talking about managing fear and acceptance of fear and any other negative emotions. Let's stop thinking that they are not important or that they're waste. I had personally so many takeaways myself, and if viewers would watch this video till the end, there would be so many takeaways that they can practically start implementing from today onwards. So I really wish the best for you. May you keep shining and inspiring others, people from all the genders, especially women. And let's start talking about more of those stereotype topics that people refrain from talking about. And let's start creating more leaders within ourselves and around us, because a leader's job is to create more leaders. And I really want to congratulate you for the leader in you, for the positive human being that you are, Veena.
Thank you so much, Shagun. So kind of you to say this. Absolute pleasure it has been to, explore this conversation with you. And I always love it when, people like you take so much curiosity in bringing out more stories into the world, because these are powerful experiences. And unless we talk on these lines, unless we bring active conversations, we will not be able to touch many lives. So thank you so much for doing what you're doing and giving me this platform to share my experiences. And I really enjoyed it.
It was lovely having you, Veena. Thank you so much for your time and your energy. And hopefully we'll have a second session with you. I would love to have it. If you could spare time, maybe 2 months, 3 months down the line, would love to have another session.
Absolutely. I will be more than happy to do that with you.
Thank you. Thanks, Veena.
Thank you.